Normally on the podcast, I tend to zoom into current events, what happened in the news just now or yesterday. But sometimes it's good to step back a little bit and try to get the larger picture, the sort of 10,000-foot view, if you will. And I'm watching a very interesting skirmish playing out on social media that raises this kind of a larger issue. So you got a guy, he's called the Last Contrarian on Twitter, and he's been posting photos of India versus the United States. Obviously catches my interest as someone who came from India to America in the late 1970s. And this guy makes the point, he goes, listen, most Westerners think of India as this kind of backward, slumdog millionaire, begging bowl of the world type of country. But he goes, you don't realize what India looks like now. He posts all these pictures of how clean the airports are, how efficient and modern the trains look, the huge skyscrapers that make even New York to some degree start looking a little bit old and run down. And he then makes the point, which is that India is an ascending society, and he says it's part of the ascending world, whereas America is part of the descending world. And he implies that Westerners are kind of in denial that they are in, you may say, on the downward slope. Now, a couple of Indians weigh in on this and kind of reinforce what he's saying. And one guy says that if you compare the Indian city of Kanpur, it launched a new metro rail system, which it built in 2 years. And he says, contrast this with San Francisco, which has spent $300 million and literally decades to build a metro system, and it's still not finished. So the efficiency is the point here. And then this Indian guy, Balaji Srinivasan, makes the point, he says, if you told me even 20 years ago that Indian cities would look better than American cities or live better, you can actually have a more livable life in them, he says, I would have thought you were out of your mind. And he says, but today, Chennai, previously Madras, he says Chennai is better than San Francisco. It looks better, it's cleaner, the infrastructure is better, it's a more livable city. And he says that Indian airports today are better than American airports, particularly these older, non-refurbished ones. And then, of course, against this comes a kind of wall of pushback. And you've got one guy saying, this is ridiculous. I lived in India. India's a basket case. And another guy goes, nah, you've talked about Chennai, and Chennai, like Mangalore, has been a somewhat planned city. He goes, now do Mumbai, which, of course, has massive parts of it that are absolute chaos. This one guy says the infrastructure in India is nowhere close to the US. India is at least 50 years behind. Now, how do you resolve this dispute? Who's right? I think actually both parties are right, but they're talking past each other. Let me give an analogy to say what I mean. Think about being on an escalator, and there are two escalators side by side, and one is going up and the other is going down. Now, you see a guy on the escalator and he's higher up. And this is the being 50 years or 20 years ahead. And the other guy on the escalator is down, closer to the bottom. But the escalators are moving in opposite directions. So one escalator is going up and the guy who's lower down is coming up and the guy who's further up is going down. So it is predictable that if current trends continue, and that's always an open question, obviously the guy who's at the bottom is going to end up on the top, and the guy who's higher up now is going to end up at the bottom. So it doesn't make any sense to say, it is true that large parts of India are still destitute. In fact, they've been destitute for eons. But India is getting better. Debbie and I have been, before COVID, we would go every couple of years, and we always notice improvements. Oh, the airport is better. You're not walking on the mud anymore, and the highways are suddenly cleaner, and the life of the Indians appears dramatically improved. The size of the Indian middle class, for example, has dramatically grown. Not to mention the affluent class, whereas it seems that in America, the middle class is pulled in two directions. Yes, there is an affluent class, but then a lot of people have actually been yanked from the middle class into the lower middle class. America, I think it is fair to say, and this is even more fair to say under Biden, is a descending society. And obviously, if we keep on the current track, this descent will be more rapid. There are some factors that are putting America on the descending slope that have nothing to do with Biden. They're broader issues, which I'll talk about at another time. But it seems to me that we need to focus, number one, on rooting out the Biden contagion, the Biden plague, getting rid of these Democrats who literally seem not only accessories of American decline, but cheerleaders of American decline. And once we get rid of those, our problems still aren't over, because we still have to vindicate the full promise of America. We still have to get America off the descending slope and put it back to where it was, really from the early 19th century all the way to the middle to late part of the 20th century. America was moving up, up, and up. And that's what I think Reagan meant when he talked about in his very poignant phrase, morning in America.